Mike, check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and most collectors won't say this, but a lot of them are desperately afraid of the retro game market collapsing. And the reason why is because a lot of them have a lot of cash tied up into their collections. And this is something that I started to realize more when I saw a video yesterday from Get the Greg Games. I believe he's a YouTuber who concentrates more on graded video games and the graded game collecting market. And he did a video yesterday where he had a guest on his channel who basically talked about how he had spent $30,000 on a first print sealed Super Mario Kart that had been graded by WADA, I think at a 9 something plus plus. And a lot of times in the video game collecting community, we hear about some of these outlandish purchases where people are paying 100,000, 200,000, $1 million for a first print original Mario Brothers. We see some of these, highly expensive collectibles on TV shows like Pawn Stars, but it's rare that you actually see an average Joe, right? Like an everyday person who's spending that type of money on retro video games. So when he had this gentleman on, it looked like he looked like a fairly young guy, and he had spent $30,000 on this sealed and graded Mario Kart. And he kind of just wanted to pick his brain and kind of have him share with the audience what would make him feel comfortable enough making that type of a purchase. And he openly said that he viewed retro video games as an investment, that he openly viewed spending that type of money on a video game as a means of, securing value or preserving value. And he was preserving value through video game collecting. Now, I know that a lot of, collectors who actually play their video games detest the graded games market because a lot of collectors feel like graded video game collectors are inadvertently pushing up the price of non-seal, non-complete, loose card and just, CIB games that you would purchase at most video game stores. And I think to a degree there is some truth to that, but there isn't. That's just my personal opinion. But I want to talk more about the overall impact of viewing retro video games as an investment, because if this is something that collectors are doing, if they are viewing and utilizing retro game collecting as some type of means of preserving income, or they're looking at video games as a store of value the same way they would with a piece of gold or stocks or Bitcoin or something like that, then this puts a very interesting twist on the mindset of a collector and their thought process and views around fluctuating prices. And I think that for those collectors who have extremely large collections, right? Because we all know that there is ranges, right? You have some people who have a collection of 5 video games, you have some people who have 500 video games, and you have those who have 5,000 video games. And I would venture to say that those who have collections into the thousands, right? Unless you're someone who's built that over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, if you're someone who spent your entire life collecting video games, that's different, because you've gradually built that up, and the investment in those games is nothing compared to someone who maybe amassed a retro game collection of 2,000 games in, say, 4 years or 5 years. Because for the most part, you've been paying 2020 prices for all your games. And we all know that retro video games have been their highest historically since 2020. 2020 is when game prices surged. So if you're a collector who's built the majority of your collection over the past 4 to 5 years, you are probably extremely afraid of the bottom falling out of retro game prices because you don't want to lose all that value. You don't want to lose all that cash, and you know that in most cases, depending on what you've been collecting, you won't see that value back. Now, there's varying degrees to this too, right? Because if you have a collection of 2,000 games, right, but half of that collection is made up of NBA Live, NBA 2K, you know, you know, Disney, Wallace and Gromit games, and just a bunch of, like, for lack of better terms, just padding games, like fluff games, then you're really in a tough spot, right? Because the truth of the matter is that you won't even be able to sell those games even if you wanted to. In fact, you probably won't even be able to give those games away. And what's a clear example of that? A clear example of that is what I see happening at GameStop. If your collection is made up of games like this, like NBA 2K and NBA 2K1 and NBA 2K3 and drag racing and music generator, if this is your collection, you won't be able to give these games away because these are games that GameStop is giving away, right? You have a lot of people who are trying to get rid of their collections now, and they're taking their entire collection to GameStop, and even GameStop is saying, we don't want this stuff, and they're just putting it on the counter and letting anyone who wants them pick them up and walk away with them. Now, I typically like to pick up a lot of these games because I tend to use the cases for case swaps. For instance, if let's say there's a game that I really want online, and it normally goes for $30, but maybe there's someone selling it for $22 because their case has some scratches or some dents, or there's some, maybe the case is broken. I'll pay less for that game, and when it comes, I'll just do a case swap with a case that's in really great condition. And it's kind of ironic, but usually the games that no one wants have the best condition because no one's played it, no one's messed with it, no one wants it. So that's why I pick that stuff up. But you're not going to be able to sell that stuff if your collection is made up of mostly a bunch of junk stuff. Now, even if your collection is made up of the highest quality games, even if you're rolling with nothing but 100 copies of Beautiful Joe, right? Let's say you've got this tier of game and that's all your collection is made up of. You are still going to have a difficult time offloading those games. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to sell them. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to find a buyer. It doesn't mean that people won't pay you close to price charting prices for the games. But it becomes a lot more difficult because anyone who's going to spend $250 on a copy of Beautiful Joe, they're going to want this game to be in darn near perfect condition. They're going to look at the jewel case. They're going to want to make sure that there's no cracks, there's no scratches. They're going to look at the manual. They're going to check the manual to make sure that the registration card is still intact. They're going to look at the back of the disc to make sure that the disc is in good condition. They're going to look at the cover art, and they're going to scan the cover art to make sure that there isn't any nicks, any blemishes, anything wrong with the game, because they're going to view this as a genuine collector's piece. And so I think that knowing that, right, there are a lot of collectors who do have collections where maybe they're missing the manual in a lot of their games. Maybe their cases are damaged, and maybe they've been building collections that aren't as pristine as, one would hope to have in their collection. And I think the realization that a lot of people are selling their collections does have a lot of collectors who are collecting based on value afraid. And I think you should be afraid because, look, it's cold. It's cold both literally and figuratively. This video is being recorded on the 7th day of January, where it's like 20 degrees where I'm at, and it feels like 10 degrees. And it's cold right now. No one's doing any yard sales. No one's doing any flea market. I mean, unless you're in Florida or Southern California. But even then, it's getting harder and harder to extract value from your collection the way you could 3 years ago. And I think this has a lot of people on edge. So, to that guy on Get the Greg's video who spent that money on that Mario Kart, he believes that now is a good time to buy because you can buy cheap. And again, if you're looking at video games as an investment, You know, what do they say? Buy when everyone's selling and sell when everyone's buying. I guess if you're a buyer, now's a great time for you to stock up and really bulk up on your collection. So you should be able to get great deals. But it's going to be tough for anyone who was using their video game collection as a nest egg for a rainy day fund. If you are viewing your collection as a rainy day fund, cash out now and get the funds in your hand before you can't do it anymore, because it's getting harder and harder. And I don't think that we're entering a season of sellers. This is going to be a season for buyers to take advantage, not sellers. It's going to get harder and harder for sellers, and I'm really interested to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts here are on this. What do you think about spending $30,000 on a Mario Kart? I'm interested to know your thoughts there. And I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.